How can media activities support student learning in the classroom? How should we think about student phones in today's schools? How can we captivate, engage, and empower our students in a world of digital distractions? Welcome back to another episode of the Teachers on Fire podcast, airing live on YouTube every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific or 11 a.m. Eastern. My name is Tim Cavey, and my mission here is to warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your professional practice. Today's Teacher on Fire is Dr. Marc Isseks. Marc is a third-generation educator with 30 years of experience. He has served as a teacher, curriculum coordinator, and building administrator in Brooklyn and Long Island. Marc is passionate about sharing strategies to increase student engagement and ensuring that schools cultivate the nurturing and invigorating learning environment that every student deserves. A self-proclaimed educational pyromaniac, and by the way, Marc, that makes you a great fit at Teachers on Fire. He is dedicated to lighting fires under people who work and setting fire to systemic conventions that do not. Dr. Isseks is the author of Forward Fast, Making Sense of Education in an Era of Rapid Change that came out in 2019, and the recently published Captivate, Engaging and Empowering Students in a World of Digital Distractions. You can connect with Marc on LinkedIn, on X at Marc Isseks, on Instagram and TikTok at EduPyro, and on his website at marcisseks.com. Marc, thank you so much for coming on the show today, my friend. Are you ready to light it up?
Tim, thanks so much for having me, and I absolutely am, so I can't wait.
Well, like I said, our brands are very compatible, my friend. We both have this fascination with fire, and I think it goes deeper than that. We really believe in the importance of on my side, teachers keeping their fire, and on your side of lighting more fires, right? And igniting the passions and the commitment that our teachers are looking for in 2024. Before we get into your mission and work, would you take us back to a story of adversity, some kind of challenge that you faced on your professional or learning journey, and describe how you overcame it?
Yeah, absolutely. Education wasn't going to be my first pathway professionally. I was a third generation educator, so I swore to myself and my parents that I would never follow in the family business. And they just kind of like smirked. I guess they knew better than I did, and they still do. But so I got my sub license while I was waiting for to like become a lawyer and a financial analyst and a Hollywood agent and all the other things that I had interest in at the time. And so I landed a leave replacement for 6 weeks. Someone who had just had a baby, was a science teacher, and so I really didn't know much about or anything, frankly, about teaching. And so I just did a very simple thing. I opened up the textbook. I wrote the notes from the textbook on the board. I put a big sign, "Do not erase," in case there was like an overzealous evening custodian. And in the next morning, the kids just came in. They copied the notes. I went over the questions at the end. The bell rang, and I did that for about 2 weeks before the assistant principal came in to do an observation. And so I did my thing, which at the time was literally nothing. And when it was over, it was a note in my mailbox to, for a date and time for my post-observation conference. I didn't even know what that even was. And I sat down in his office, and he took out a cigarette, which at the time, and this is like the mid-90s, so people were smoking in the building at the time. And he lights it up and he stares at me, and I won't curse for your audience, but he basically says, "What the F was that?" So that's when it started to dawn on me. I started to do the math real quick, and I was like, you know what, maybe this isn't exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And then he just proceeds to, give me a well-deserved lecture on what I should be doing and not ever doing what I did, like what he witnessed again. And so my adversity is that I almost didn't make it out of the first post-observation conference.
Yeah.
But I don't know what I did or what I said to provide enough reassurance that I would be better and work harder and never do that again. And that was the beginning of the journey that kind of led me to here. And I really haven't stopped since I walked out of that smoke-filled office 30 years ago.
Well, there's that fire connection, right, Marc? But seriously,
right.
the fact that you were lit up the way you were and you stayed in the profession is remarkable. So that's number one. But Yes, I mean, he told it like it was, and that gave you that jolt that really got you thinking. And obviously, you recovered, and things have been going in a positive direction since then. Marc, I want to congratulate you on Captivate. There it is. So, Captivate Tech is a microphone, not an encyclopedia. Engaging and empowering students is the subline in a world of digital distractions. And we know a book is a labor of love, my friends. So congrats on getting that published and released and shared out into the world. I want you to set the stage for us. What does the challenge look like for today's teacher?
Well, we are desperately fighting to win the attention of students in a TikTok, YouTube, post-COVID, Instagram world. And so we can no longer simply teach. We must captivate. We have to do something bigger, better, more impactful. We can't rely on yesterday's instructional practices if we're going to meet the needs of today's students. It just won't happen. And part of that is challenging ourselves to overcome our own cognitive biases and create the space so we can co-create the future of what teaching and learning is going to be all about. And that's what I've set out to accomplish with this book.
That is an awesome vision, and I look forward to hearing more from it. What hope can you offer the teacher, Marc, who's struggling to, as you say, captivate, engage, and empower their students right now?
I'm very hopeful. I have nothing but hope. I have nothing but optimism. Honestly, what are the choices there? We're going to fold up our tents and just say that's that for education.
Hear, hear.
I mean, it's the most important. It's the most important thing that we can do for young people is to educate them. And teach them the skills that they need to thrive and enjoy their lives and find joy and find happiness. So yes, of course, the system has many shortcomings, and that's why I wrote the book. I wanted to contribute to the conversation of how we're going to overcome those shortcomings. And but the reality is, students have access to more ideas and more influences than ever before, but so do educators. So there's where the hope is. If you're not getting the professional development that you need wherever you are in the world, outsource it. Join PLNs, watch YouTube videos, go to podcasts like this one. Read my book, network and meet people who can pour gasoline on the fire that lives inside of you.
Yeah, I always say don't wait to be professionally developed. Develop yourself. You've got to get out there. And in 2024, there's really no excuse. There's so much on-demand content available. So I believe in the book, just to push you a little bit further, you get into creation, you get into PBL, you get into the ways that we can sort of not flip the paradigm, or I suppose that may be appropriate, but without being subject to or dominated by distractions, we actually use technology for learning in positive ways. Is that some of the hope that you offer in your book?
Absolutely. I mean, that technology is the most powerful thing that we have. It's the most powerful thing that we've ever seen. So how can we use the technology and its full leverage to empower students? That's the name of the game. And that's where the line tech is a microphone and not an encyclopedia. The original uses of digital technology, instructional technology in classrooms was originally just look things up, or here's a PDF of the handout that I made 15 years ago, but now I could just give it to you digitally and not have to wait online at the copy machine. And those are all improvements. So don't get me wrong. We had to start someplace, but how do we turn our students from consumers of technology to creators of technology and creators of vision, and using the technology to speak that vision and demonstrate their understanding? And here's the thing, they're already doing it. They're already doing it. Now, we don't necessarily love the things that they're saying, on their devices. And as an assistant principal, I can tell you that I've spent way too many hours in my office trying to, I guess unring the bell of things that have been shared via social media and messaging. But the reality is they already know how to do these things, but we can teach them how to do it better. And more importantly, we can teach them how to do it using the curriculum and the standards and the ideas of education that we're looking to impart. So that's really where the thing that excites me about technology is but we have to get it straight and what its purpose is. And it's not just about Google Classroom and Kahoot. It's so much more powerful than that.
Google Classroom and Kahoot. I love that. And yes, you're right. Our students are creating. They're making stuff all the time. They're creating content all the time. But we just need to channel that energy. And I do want to come back to this idea of media creation in the classroom. That's a favorite topic of mine for sure. First of all, though, I want to put this to you. Some teachers and building leaders are more open to change than others, as I'm sure you've found. When you hear, but this is how we've always done it, how do you respond to that?
Well, first I curl up in the fetal position. That's like that's my first go-to. I empathize completely with people who are, have that mindset, because when you study psychology of cognitive entrenchment, it makes all the sense in the world. You have some early success with something, and then what happens is you naturally stop looking for solutions or better solutions for problems that you've already solved. But make no mistake, it's a bias. It's absolutely a bias. And we're doing all this very important work trying to identify and correct and improve upon all these other biases that exist, socially, racially, et cetera. But let's not stop there. Let's go and examine our cognitive bias as well. Scientifically, there are many studies, but one in particular that I cite in the book is called the Einstellung effect, which basically means that, once you've identified a way of doing something, you typically stick to it. And if there's a better way or simpler way, a faster way, you will ignore it, because you are blind to it intentionally, because you feel like you've already solved the problem. And I think that's the case in education. We feel like we've already solved this problem. We know how to teach. Well, we knew how to teach. The students at that time when these methods were kind of invented, if you will. But the times have changed. So much has changed just in the last 5 or 10 years. How can we rationally expect the same old teaching practices to retain their same levels of effectiveness? And the quote that really stands out for me, and I'll just kind of paraphrase it because it's kind of long, but Robert Iger, who is the CEO of Disney, he kind of inherited the company after they had lost their luster after their tremendous success for decades and decades in the world of animation. And they kept making hand-drawn cartoons, and the rest of the world had moved on, like Pixar and DreamWorks. They were making computer animated cartoons, and they were lapping Disney in the box office and every other measurable statistic. And there were people in the organization who said, well, if we don't do hand-drawn animation, then we are basically defiling the memory of Walt Disney, who's the founder of the company. It was his vision that got us here. How can we turn our backs on him? But then Robert Iger basically said, well, we have two choices. We can respect the past, or we can revere the past. If we revere the past, then we will die before we change anything. But if we respect the past, then we'll take the values and the principles and the fundamentals of who we are and what we believe in, and then we'll adapt in terms of the methods that we use to bring that vision and bring our ideals and values into the world in this current state and this current iteration. That to me is where we need to be in education. So it's not like your methods from 20 years ago are terrible. What your intentions were wonderful. Now, how can you continue to bring those intentions forward into the future, but just modify and modernize the methods in which you bring that fire and that value to your students? That to me is the key.
What a great distinction. Revere versus respect the past. And I wholeheartedly agree. Love it. Well, thank you for joining us, Teachers on Fire. If you're getting value from this conversation, give this video a like. I see quite a number of people on YouTube and X right now. So thank you for tuning in and joining me and my guest today, Dr. Marc Isseks. Let's keep going, Marc. How can our assessment practices play a role in engagement and empowerment? I'm taking a bit of a risk with this question. I don't know if that was a large focus of the book, but in my mind, I think assessment is such an important part of this conversation.
Absolutely. And there are different interpretations of assessment. I'll go back to my original roots as a middle school teacher in Brooklyn, and literally early in the semester in the year, I saw some of my colleagues take their classes into the hallway, line them into two parallel rows, and then walk up and back in the middle of those rows with a red pen, telling them that this is the red pen and the red pen rules. No, that's a true story.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And it's about establishing authority through assessment. It's about establishing
No.
authority through grades. And that to me is the wrong use of assessment and the
Yeah.
wrong use of grades. Um,
It's not empowering.
no, it's the exact opposite. But but I was 22, so who was I to say anything to anybody in the hallway at the time? But if we continue to assessment's important in terms of accountability. However, we just have to be careful, because if we continue to teach to the test, then there will always be a large segment of our student population whose needs, interests, and abilities will continue to be overlooked. We are living in a world that is more and more driven by individualization, yet our schools are seemingly driven by standardization. And that's just one of the many disconnects that we have to reckon with if we're going to move smartly into the future, and effectively into the future. So where do assessments what role do assessments play? I'm very much interested in what students can produce as a demonstration of their understanding and learning, but understanding also that that's ongoing, and not something that's if you're familiar with finite games and infinite games, not something that's the end all be all at the end of a marking period, but the continuation of a conversation throughout and across a student's developmental and educational journey.
Yeah. And I think the key word there is conversation. It's an ongoing conversation. And so when I think about assessment practices that actually give students more empowerment, more agency, I think about self-assessment. I mean, in my district and in my jurisdiction, we're trying to focus more on self-assessment, self-reflection, peer assessment. These are activities that change the relationship from teacher-student, the student as spectator, to now the student is actually engaged. They're an agent of their own learning, and they are involved in the learning process. And that's really what we want.
And if you think about it, Tim, I'm sorry to interrupt, but now that the workforce and the work environment has shifted completely to like work from home, if you can't self-reflect and manage yourself, you're in a lot of trouble professionally.
Yeah, absolutely. That metacognition is not just important in school. We've got our friend Josh Tovar tuning in from Garland ISD in Texas. Good morning to you as well, Josh. Thank you so much for joining us on YouTube. And if you're not connected with Josh, friends listening and watching, make sure you check out Josh Tovar. Tyler says, good morning from New York. All right. Welcome to you, sir. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. And then back to Josh, who says, in school, my papers were always bleeding at the hands of that teacher pen that was blue and white with 4 colors on it. Yes, we know that pen well. So Josh is sharing a little bit of his trauma from the world of assessment. Again, I just want to emphasize, I think there is an opportunity here to get our students involved in the assessment process. It doesn't have to be a passive experience on their end. Mark, we've talked a lot about digital distractions, so I want to dive in a little bit on media creation, because I know you've researched this area for a year, better part of a year plus. You've been tuned in for a long, long time. So tell us maybe an example or two, a bit of your vision. How can media creation activities engage and empower learners?
So as I was saying, before, this is undoubtedly the most powerful tool that any human has held in their hands.
Right.
So now, how do we maximize that to get the most leverage? If you remember Archimedes, give me a fulcrum and a lever long enough, and I can move the world. Well, we have the lever that's long enough now. We can move the world.
Wow.
But where do we put the fulcrum? And if you put the fulcrum in the wrong place, then you lose your mechanical advantage. And so when we are using technology for giving students PDFs and sharing notes and things like that, it's all wonderful. It has its value. So please don't mistake what I'm saying. But you're not getting the maximum mechanical advantage there. You have to move the fulcrum away, and that is when you get creativity. That's when you get innovation. That's when you get student voice. That's when the tech is a microphone and not an encyclopedia. And one of the ways that we do that is by emphasizing process over product. And this is, talking about the research that you mentioned before, I came across this wonderful piece of research called Even Einstein Struggled. And what it basically said is, when we teach Einstein as just a genius, then it actually takes away motivation, because students don't see themselves as geniuses, perhaps. So therefore, I'll never be Einstein. And so that's that. But they don't understand that Einstein had to become Einstein. Einstein struggled. Einstein had setbacks. So when teachers share the struggle stories with students, they all of a sudden can see their own struggles there. So, when we teach Michael Jordan, do we say greatest basketball player of all time? Or do we talk about cut from his freshman team in high school, how he had to overcome that? And that is how we help, like you were talking about with this, with reflection and self-assessment. Also, where students can give themselves grace and understand that they may not understand something yet. This Carol Dweck's mindset. They may not understand something yet, but they're on the road to getting there and how they can overcome adversity. So in creation and or creation activities, to keep students engaged and empowered, we have to also teach them that the process is the most important thing, and not just worry about the end product, because that can take the motivation away. And a perfect example of that is Ed Catmull, who is the one of the co-founders of Pixar. Has an expression that he used in Creativity Inc., where he said, early on, all of our movies suck. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but our job is to go from suck to not suck. And that's just such a perfect way of encapsulating that sentiment. Early on, all of our students are not very good at just about everything and anything that we ask them to do. Our job is to help them go from not very good to exceptional. And we have to kind of view it through that lens.
It's the iterative process, right? And it's the power of yet and all that great growth mindset stuff that I think has so much power and really lies at the core of everything we're doing in schools. Marc, I want to put you on the hot seat a little bit. Now, we didn't have time this week to talk about this, so I hope you're comfortable with this. But I want to come at you gently, affectionately, friend to friend here, and just pose the opposing side of this conversation. We're talking about phone bans. And Marc, I'm aware that I've read the blog posts of teachers that are thinking of leaving or have left the profession, and fighting the phone battles is often at the top of the list. So let me just plead devil's advocate here for a moment. When Chromebooks, laptops, and iPads abound in the classroom, what are we winning from allowing students to hang on to their phones?
So, how much time you have?
Yeah.
Let me just start by saying that I don't ignore at all, and I completely recognize and respect, and I'm genuinely concerned with the negative impact of social media and screen time and what it's doing to students' development. Just brain development alone, let alone everything else. But first of all, there as an administrator, there's a battle here that I don't know if we necessarily want to take on, because the students are not paying for these phones with their corporate salaries. The parents are paying for the phones and giving it to their kids. So I think part of the problem is, parents don't fully recognize what they're giving to their children, by and large. I know it's a very overgeneralization for sure, but when I speak to parents and I do workshops with parents on educational technology and personal technology, I try to make it very clear to the parents that when you hand your child a phone, it may say phone on the box, but it is not a phone. It is something very, very different. So please understand what it is that you're giving them, and don't just be under the kind of false pretense that it's a phone. But the reason why I feel like we don't want to, like if we could snap our fingers and the phones go away, then let's snap our fingers. But it's not that easy. And what schools are great at is education, and what they're not great at is regulation. And regulation soaks up energy and resources that we can't afford to divert, because we need every resource that we have to fight the fight in terms of helping educate kids to the best of our ability. So that's where my concern lies. It's not because I think it's a great idea for a 12-year-old to have a cell phone. I don't. I'm just worried about what the repercussions are in a school building when we take our resources off, try to fight a two-front war, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad I asked you, because I actually really resonate with your heart there. As a part-time administrator myself, I'm also concerned about those points of friction that we have with kids. I mean, as another example, hat rules in schools. To me, this is my own position here, I would rather allow kids to wear hats, because I think that's a point of friction that I'd rather not put between teacher and student. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I think that's your heart in this topic, and definitely resonate with that. As I said, what's one thing you'd like us to think about when it comes to understanding student motivation, because we know that so much of learning comes down to student motivation. I know that was a focus in your work. What's one takeaway, one tidbit, one thing to think about from this conversation around student motivation?
It's TikTok's 3-second rule. TikTok their analytic team has basically come out with what they call the 3-second rule, and I'm sure you could already figure it out. If you don't engage the viewer in the first 3 seconds, they are going to swipe away. And then when they swipe away, they're not coming back. In a conventional lesson, we pedagogically have said that we have 3 to 5 minutes to get our kids' attention and get them ready to learn. That is a massive disconnect. So either TikTok is wrong or we're wrong. But TikTok is getting all the likes and the views, and we're not. So I think we have to respect the fact that TikTok and Instagram and YouTube know what they're doing. They understand the game that is being played now. It's a game for attention. If you follow Gary Vee or you listen to Gary Vee, he Day Trading Attention is his latest book. That is the only thing right now. It's attention focused. We have to capture that in the opening seconds. We don't have time for warming up because brains don't work that way anymore. When you have to repair, your whatever it may be, your appliance, your dryer, you don't go on YouTube and first look at videos on the history of dryers or who invented the dryer. Like you have a problem that you need to solve. You want to get to the solution right away. That's your brain has fuel injection as opposed to, like my old Buick from in the 80s where I had on a cold winter day, I had to start it up for 10 minutes before I, could put it into drive. So we have to match our methods with the moment. And so the TikTok 3-second rule to me means that if we have a great concept, a really compelling concept, we have to save our best for first, not save the best for last, because they won't be around by the time we get to that really great thing that we want them to understand. So we have to start with that really compelling idea, and then we have to keep them on the hook for the whole period, or whatever your learning target is. And that's, to me, the key in terms of student motivation.
Mm-hmm. It does add a little bit of pressure to teachers. I hate to put it that way, but that's the reality of the situation. It's
a really hard job.
Really strategically, it is a hard job. We got to think strategically about what is our hook. We got to come out strong with that compelling reason, that compelling vision for the learning target of the day, whatever the learning goal is. And then keep it. And, Mark, I'll go a little bit further and say on a practical level, this is something I see as an administrator and I try to practice myself as a part-time teacher, is just on a practical level, if we can be ready to go at the bell, that makes a lot of difference too. So if the bell goes and I'm like in the corner, sort of setting up my laptop and connecting and turning the projector screen on and doing this and doing that, and meanwhile the students are sort of, they're in that state of just waiting, that's not a great way to, as you say, sort of lead out of the gate. So if, as a teacher, if we can prepare in advance, I'm talking in really practical terms here, before that lesson gets started, I think that's an important part of the equation too.
But Tim, they're not waiting. That's the point. They're not waiting. Push
Right.
Notifications are in the air. They're flying towards their phone. They're not waiting. Nobody just waits. You don't wait online nobody waits online at the bank anymore, but you get the idea. Like when you're waiting for a bus, nobody waits without being engaged in something. That's how it is now. Everybody is engaged in something right away. How many times do people touch their phone in an average day? Hundreds, thousands of times. So the students aren't waiting for you. That's the point. So if we don't get them right away, they will get busy with their own agenda and their own curriculum. And I highly doubt that it will be like simplifying polynomials. I could be wrong, but
yeah. Mark, tell us about your work at the State of Ed podcast. As a fellow education podcaster, I love shining a light on other education podcasts out there. So tell us about your pod mission, your content, and who should tune in over there.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. I really appreciate it. So State of Ed podcast started about 9 years ago. We were hoping to do one every month. That quickly came to an end. It was my co-host and I, Dr. Nick Simone, who is just an absolute brilliant educator, one of the best educators in America. I'm very fortunate to call him a friend. So our mission is to try to highlight and showcase the amazing work that educators are doing all over not only the country but all over the world. We've had educators on from Asia and so on. We just want to bring those stories and give those people an opportunity to share their voice with our audience, and really just get into their perspectives. And again, it's really about having a conversation and contributing to that ongoing conversation, and try to bring enlightenment in whatever way that we can, and share that with as many people as we can.
Awesome stuff. Well, make sure if you are tuning in, if you're listening right now on the audio only version of Teachers on Fire, make sure to check out the State of Ed podcast. Don't leave this podcast episode, but surf on over to the State of Ed podcast and make sure you're subscribed over there. And on that note, if you're enjoying this video conversation, consider adding the Teachers on Fire YouTube channel to your morning commute. Start your morning or your week on fire. Marc, we're going to shift into some rapid fire questions here as we start to wind down a little bit. First one up for you, share about a personal habit or a productivity hack that contributes to your success and keeps your fire burning.
Oh, wow. It kind of started during the pandemic, when obviously the pandemic was a very terrible time for so many people. But during that period when we were home and everything was shut down, I kind of rediscovered the importance of self-care and exercise, which I had ignored terribly for many years, because I've been just so involved in work and taking care of family and all those different obligations, and I ignored myself for far too long. So I started walking about 4 or 5 miles a day, about 5 days a week, which was so great for my body, so great for my mind, even during such a terrible time. Then I quickly got bored of listening to music, so I started to shift to podcasts, YouTube videos, TED Talks, etc. And the next thing I knew, I was opening up a note in my notes app and starting to just jot down ideas. And about 1,000 miles later, I had enough material to start writing Captivate. And so it really worked. It worked for me on so many different levels, because I was just healthier, lost some weight, felt better. Mental health was so much better. But I also started to look forward to those walks, because it was my learning time. It was my exercise time. It was my me time, but it was also my creativity time. So I got to kind of bring all those different things together. And it was a really wonderful experience.
Point us to an ed tech tool or app that you currently love using somewhere in your professional practice, or perhaps one that you see really captivating, engaging, and empowering learners.
I am a Canva junkie. I don't know if there's a support group that, where it meets or anything. But I just love Canva. I love, share. We created in my school a print kit. So now all the different fonts and so on that we use, we all share. So we start to really bring a cohesive vision to the school, even in just the signs, like the sign up for, junior high volleyball, like it's in Canva now, where it used to be just like written in Arial size 11 font, and like literally walk up to the thing to understand what it said. So I really love Canva. I'm also quickly becoming a fan of text-to-image.AI. It really solves a lot of problems, get you where you need to be a lot faster, and just one of the many AI tools that are absolutely game-changing.
Recommend one book, Marc, one that you've been reading lately, or perhaps one of your all-time faves that's been deeply influential in your thinking.
Well, in terms of influential, I mean, I can't not talk about the book Unconscious Bias in Schools by Dr. Tracy Benson and Dr. Sarah Fireman. Like many folks, I'm on a personal journey to become a more compassionate and empathetic human being. So for me, reading this book was like just kind of turning on the lights in so many wonderful ways. Really helped me develop an ability to kind of articulate where I am on that journey and understanding my own unconscious bias, and it really helped me lean into difficult conversations instead of shying away from them. It's a tremendous book. I really recommend it.
All right. And then tell us about someone that we need to follow on Instagram, Education X, LinkedIn, or someone else, TikTok perhaps, and share why they've been inspiring you lately.
So I've become a fan of Libo Valencia. He's on Twitter at Mr. Valencia 24. He's a math teacher, and he's just so creative and full of great teacher energy, and posts so many wonderful, shares so many wonderful things. And he makes math engaging and interesting and fun. And like, if you've ever heard of math, those are seldom the things that are said to describe it. But Libo has found a way, and he's just so effusive and has such a passion for it, and it comes through in all of his content.
There you go. All right. Well, Thank you so much for that shout out. I'll be checking him out later. What are the best ways for the Teachers on Fire listening to follow you and connect with your work, Marc?
So my website, marcisseks.com, that has my link tree where you can catch all of my socials on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram, TikTok, etc. So that'd be probably the one-stop shop place to go.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And just before we wrap up completely, I've got a few last comments from the audience. Josh on YouTube, going back to the cell phone conversation, he feels like that's the hill to die on. No cell phones, they are toxic. So that's his side of the conversation, Marc. We'll have to stage a follow-up debate perhaps at some point. And he says, if your campus culture created engaging tier 1 strategies, we won't have these cell phone or discipline issues. That aligns with your message, I think. Yeah, that aligns with your position exactly. And Mel is here. It's great to see Mel, educator from Africa, tuning in. She says, I might need to give this a replay later. Yes, and she agrees with your Libo shout out.
Oh, nice. So,
Brother Andrew tuning in to say, Tim on fire today. Well, that's because I'm with the pyromaniac, the education pyromaniac. So thank you for that, Andrew. But yes, thank you for joining this broadcast, Teachers on Fire. And thank you, Marc, for sharing your time today. I always say I know how precious Saturday time is. And so I really, really appreciate your sacrifice. I know you're on the road, you're away from your family right now, but thank you so much for joining me and chatting about what it is to engage and empower our learners in this time of digital distraction. Such an important topic. Again, the book is Captivate. Get out there and check it out, educators. Teachers on Fire, I'm your host, Tim Cavey. Thankful that you decided to spend some of your day listening to the podcast on the audio-only form or perhaps tuning into the video. I hope that in some way the content you heard today from Dr. Marc Isseks sparked your thinking and ignited your practice. And I'll meet you next week right here on the Teachers on Fire podcast. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go.